tense. Regular section starts on page 140. And your fill-in-the-blank notes. We're just going to go step by step. First little bullet. Future tense is used to describe actions and events that will happen in the future. Should be implied by the name. In English, we'll use the words normally will. We don't normally use shall, but if you want to sound fancy, you can. You shall do something in the future. You haven't done it yet, which would be past tense, so you're not doing it now, which would be present tense. So you will or shall do something. Those words are synonymous. Just like when we talked about the imperfect tense, used to was understood as part of the translation of a verb. Will or shall will be part of the translation of the verb. So you're not going to need a word for will or shall. When we actually conjugate a verb in the future tense, it's going to already mean will study, will talk, will whatever the verb happens to be. So it's the will or shall is understood as part of the translation when you conjugate the verb itself. Now, if you look on page 140 under note number 2, it tells you that you've already learned the construction ir plus a plus infinitive. That was Spanish 1, baby stuff, to say that you're going to do something. That's another way to say future tense is just what I call simple future, because we do it in present tense. Voy a estudiar, I'm going to study, versus I will study, which is the actual future tense. Everybody see the difference? Okay. So you can do it in the present tense when you're writing your own sentences, but anything that we're doing for this chapter, we're doing the actual future tense. Will, and then whichever verb meaning comes after it. Okay. So just a note there on page 140 in your book. All right. So since will study, the will is understood. Study conjugated in the future tense will be just a one word, which will mean will study. Or will any other your verbs. All right, as another simple tenses, the forms of the future consist of a stem and an ending. What's the difference? What's a stem?
Doesn't change, just like the
Right, the beginning part. So it's the beginning part without what? The ending, the AR, ER, IR. So the ending is the AR, ER, IR. The stem is the part that you're left with once you drop the AR, ER, IR. Now that's how we've known to conjugate verbs up until this point. This is the tense that changes that. So as soon as you get the concept that you're not doing what you've always been doing with conjugation, then it'll be kind of an easy chapter for you to remember. For most verbs that we've done up until this point, we've always dropped the ending. For future tense, see if you get what it's trying to say from the statement. The future stem is the infinitive. What does that mean?
You don't drop anything.
Right. So infinitive is normally the whole entire verb, and then AR, ER, IR. If in the future tense the stem is the infinitive, we're not dropping AR, ER, IR. That's the main difference. What you're doing instead is you're taking the endings and you're just attaching it at the end of the verb, but you're not dropping your AR, ER, IR. So it's a habit to have been doing it all the way since Spanish 1. Now we're not dropping for this chapter. So you keep your AR, ER, IR on there. Okay. So what will all stems, before you add your endings, what will they all end in? R, right? So that's something for you to double check yourself. The infinitive will always end in an R, and you'll always hear that R before you have the future tense ending. So for pronunciation purposes and for your spelling to double check that you're doing it right, you'll always have an R before you add your ending to it.
It's like a rolly R.
It's not a trilled R. Now there will be some trilled R's when you have two R's together. So we're going to see some of those with the irregulars. All right, and the good news is that we have the same endings for all verbs, AR, ER, and IR. One box for all.
Sorry.
One box fits all. Okay. I'm going to show you the endings here in a minute, but I want you to note that the first person plural, which is a fancy term for what? First person on the plural side is
We.
the we, de nosotros. Okay? That one is the only one that takes an accent. So if you look at your endings, either on page 140 or on your notes here, it's E with an accent. Oh, I'm sorry, it's the only one that doesn't take an accent. Let me see that backwards. So nosotros is the only one that does not get an accent. But all the other ones do. So E with an accent for the O form. AS with an accent on the A for the to form. El A usted or anything singular, A with an accent. Nosotros is EMOS. There's no IMOS, don't get confused. Just EMOS with no accent. And always good to jot down your vosotros even though we're not responsible for it. So E with an accent, then IS, and then AN with an accent. Now these look very similar to other endings we've done. Kind of a combination of different things. What makes it different?
The R.
Okay, the accents for sure, and then making sure that you don't drop so that you have your R and then you attach these. So I don't want you to get confused because they do look like a combination of different endings that we've done in the past, but obviously this is the one box that fits all, so the new box to memorize for all future tense verbs. And you might want to jot down a note to yourself that for regular verbs, you will not drop your AR, IR. You're just going to add these to the end of it. You're going to attach it at the end. And if you look on page 140, you've got examples of verbs conjugated there. So estudiar, estudiaré, estudiarás, estudiará, estudiaremos, estudiarán. For leer, leeré, leerás, leerá, leeremos, leerán. And escribir, escribiré, escribirás, escribirá, escribiremos, escribirán. So on page 140, you have an example of an AR, an ER, and an IR, all not dropped with your endings, and then attach these at the end. Remember that any time that we switch tenses, all the rules go out the window for previous tenses, right? So are there stem changers in the future tense? At least not that we've learned so far. The irregulars will change something in the stem, but no stem changes in the sense of the ones that we've learned in the past. E to IE, O to UE, E to I, those are all present tense. Boot changes in the preterite. We have basement, E to I, O to U changes. So all those rules out the window, because we're now in a new tense. Questions so far? Okay, so that's regular. Now flip over to page 170 in your book, and that's where your irregular are.